Hi, I'm Marie Fielding here at the Appleton Museum of Art in Ocala, Florida. Welcome to making a Valentine dish. We're going to go through, I just don't have a PowerPoint here. I'm just going to go through this really quick to make sure you have an idea of what's going to be happening. The materials, obviously your air-dried clay, and to make some of these larger ones, this will, I use the 2.5 box of Crayola. With that one, you can make several different things. Okay, so you need the clay, you're gonna need a rolling pin, you need a knife for cutting or some type of needle. This is an awl that I use, a pattern for your heart. This is, paper, anything can be used. This is one of those cardstock manila folders. You need some water for a little blending, and you need a bowl or a plate. If you want yours more flat, then you want a plate, or you can use a bowl to have it to dry on. You work a surface to work on. I'll show you how to use food coloring if you want to do like a marbleized clay. So that's an option. Wax paper is an option. I like to use it so your clay doesn't stick so much to the board, especially at the end when you're trying to pick that up. It's all decorated and put it in your bowl. Okay, so you've got your materials. This next page is going to give you just some tips when you're rolling out your clay, different things about air-dried clay. I'm not going to go into all of this. A lot I'm going to probably say as we do this. So that's some tips for air-dried clay, because it is very different from regular clay. Okay, this, let's just say it's different, and I'll go into that later. You're going to roll out your clay on a board. This one just gives you an example of that marbleized clay, which is really very, very pretty, and that's what it looks like here. It can be really beautiful. You want to have some type of material to give yourself some texture. You can use any type of lace. If you wanted to, you bubble wrap if you want it more contemporary. You can draw designs if you want to, and you could use any type of material. This is rickrack that I've used for lines. Okay, let's see here. This is an example of the lace on here, which this right here is using a piece of lace. You put it inside your bowl. It's going to take a couple of days to dry. After a day or so, you can take it out of the bowl, and you want to make sure you turn it over. You could also even use a cookie drying rack, because the air will flow underneath that, which would be nice. I'll show you how to add one piece of clay to another if you want to attach a design. And this explains it a little bit more. And then when you get down to everything is dry, then it's up to you, to decide how you want to paint that. You can use Modge, Podge, and Collage, acrylic paint. I have glitter glue that I use. Any type of material, trim. Yeah, if you want to put some gemstones on there, get a hot glue gun and decorate it with hot glue. And so we're ready to start. And markers and a little bit of paint. So there's that one. This one's kind of funny. This one also has lace on it and a little bit of trim, but I also rubbed on some glitter glue. Obviously, none of these can be used with food because it's air-dried clay. None of this is going to be food safe, but you could put jewelry, whatever in it. This one, I cut out a piece of wallpaper and put that on with Modge Podge. So that's another option. If you wanted to decorate it with some type of pictures, you could do that as well. So let me get this. And this one, I'm going to say there's probably close to 5 drops in there. And I haven't tried, like mixing some blue and some red if I wanted to get a purple. I don't know. But if if you have a little bit, you might want to try it, try different things and see what you can come up with. You might like it. Don't waste a lot of clay on it, just in case you hate it. Okay. So I'm going to put this aside right now. And when I work with clay, actually with anything, I can't work with gloves. So now I'm going to cut. Does everybody have their clay? Did anybody have any trouble getting? I hope you didn't. But there's always Amazon. Now, depending on how large you want your dish, obviously is how much clay. Crayola makes a small container that's a 2.5 container. And from that 2.5, I was able to get this one. I think these two, I had to add a little more to get that. So you can get a lot of different dishes, plates, whatever you want to make out of that smaller, around 2.5 container. I'm just going to smooth this together a little bit. And I'm going to stand up. I have to stand when I roll. So, especially something this large. And I am going to roll this out. Again, keep turning that over. To do probably this size. So, keep checking. You don't want the dish too thick, but it's better if it was thick rather than too thin. If it's too thin, it may crack when it's drying. Just a little bit more. I picked up a little of that marbling there. This, honestly, okay, I'm going to sit back down. I'm good. Regular clay is much easier to use. You're going to find this is a little more difficult if you've been using regular clay. With regular clay, you have to have access to a kiln, and for a lot of people, that's just not a possibility. Unfortunately, again, air-dried clay is you cannot use with food. Regular clay, once it's fired, you could. If you have these little stretch marks and things in here, don't worry about it. I'm looking at this is about almost a half an inch. I wouldn't go thinner. Right. I'm going to turn this just a little bit. Okay. All right. If you wanted to, before I do this, you could start putting a texture on here. So if I wanted to do this texture, I'm just going to, it doesn't need to be rolled that much. And then you would have that really bumpy texture. If you want something like that, you could use that. I mean, it's anything that you want to use. For this one, I really think anything worked into the dough is fine. I'm sure acrylic paint would work fine because it's just going to sink into this clay. Yeah, so I would try that. At first I was just thinking of what, somebody might have around the house that they want to use for color, but I'm sure that would work. I'm not using food coloring right now. I'm just using the plain dough. I had done a piece with food coloring earlier. If you want to use that, you need to add the food coloring before you roll this out. Okay, that's, you need to do the work that the food coloring or the paint in before you roll this out. Because to try and put it in here now, you're just going to get blobs on here. It has to be worked, it has to be worked into the dough, or the clay rather. This is not, probably not quite a 1/2 inch, but I wouldn't go any thinner than that. I can't really tell you because I don't have a ruler, but all right, I am going to cut, and then, so if you've got a needle, you want to hold it straight up and down, and I'm just going to cut this off. Sometimes I'll cut it in pieces because it's easier. But you can also use a knife. Again, hold your pattern down and almost hold it straight up and down and just follow along with your edges, your edge to your pattern. I'm going to cut this piece off. It's just easier, I think, to do it in different sections. So I would hold my pattern down, my paper pattern, and cut that. And I'm going to go back and use this. But I always hold the pattern down just to help secure that. When you do this, you're going to find that you do have a rough edge on this, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Now, this is actually a folder, a manila folder. I cut these up all the time. So as you can see, there's the bottom of the folder. But a piece of paper is fine, is absolutely fine. Okay, before I talk about these rough edges, I have a runner here that I'm going to use. I don't know if you can see those flowers, and the holes. Let's use the other end. So I've got flowers down the middle. This clay, you can keep using this quite a while. It's not like with regular clay. I'll sit down. With regular clay, you know how your hands will absorb the moisture and it starts to dry out and get cracked. This will go much longer, and you can add water to this to soften this up. And I'm going to roll this. This again is going to stretch out your clay slightly, and I have a good impression there. So. Now this has stretched a little, as you can see. If it's really looking kind of out of whack, you can put this down again and cut it. But really, right now, this is looking pretty good to me. So I'm going to leave it. See, now this is a whole lot easier to pick up. If there's anything that you really wanted to add to this, I mean, you can add text. If you wanted to do, you know, polka dots, you could add things. You know, this is actually, I just will go around here and add a few just to my edges. You don't ever want to go through the clay. I'm only going to go that far. And you got to be careful. I'm finding that I'm almost picking up some clay inside my straw. So straight up and down, and a couple more. And yep, a couple more. Let's see. I'm gonna put one here. All right. Now, remember I talked about the edges. As I rolled this out, it did kind of smooth out a lot of those edges, but if you have ragged edges, when this is dry, you can sand this, but a lot of times I like to go around with a little water on my finger and smooth out any of those As you can see, as soon as you add water to this, it smooths right out. But if you still have some rough edges when this is all dry, you can take a piece of sandpaper and take care of any of those. But I do like to use the water first because it saves a lot on me using sandpaper later. Okay. One that I did want to show you, I'm just going to, now let's say you have something on here that you don't like. You actually can take it out a little bit with your water. So if I wanted, let's say, because this one is a little bit off, I want to take that out. I'm going to use water on my finger and I'm just going to keep smoothing that. As it dries, it will not stick. It'll to the bowl. So you can take this out, not a problem. You should be able to take that out tomorrow. You can press this further into, as you see, into the bowl if you really want it curved. Okay, and I'm going to take care of this. This is one that I did earlier last week. You're going to find when your clay dries, and I tested things on the back here, it is not going to be a pure white, and you may really not like the shade of this when it dries. Yeah, how's that? Yeah, so I used a different piece of lace on this one, and then I did paint it white. I used acrylic paint because I just wanted a really bright white, which was the same thing on this one. This also was painted white before I did any other painting on it. This one has been sanded. You can sand the edges. This one still looks a little cracky, but yes, it absolutely can be sanded. In fact, that's what I would suggest. Anything that's wrapped can be put in here, absolutely. Don't throw your M&Ms in here or pieces of fudge in here or crackers or anything. Yes, anything wrapped, and that's perfect. That would be lovely on the table. This one I had painted white first, and you can see right here it got wet. So it's going to turn that beige color again, but that will dry right out. This little area, that will dry right out and become white again. Because as soon as you add water to this, it starts to break down just a little bit, okay? This one, I did spray this. It doesn't really show. I did spray this with a clear acrylic spray, and it just sinks right in. So it's not all that visible. If you're going to paint, you need to use an acrylic paint. Any type of acrylic is the best. Tempera paint is going to flake right off. It just won't sit. It'll sit on there fine. It starts to dry, it's going to flake off. So you need to have some type of an acrylic paint on here. And believe it or not, I used glitter glue on this one to get all that little glittery shine in there for this one. And that was something cut out from a piece of wallpaper. So that you could use Modge Podge. It works really well. And that is not going to come off. Spray sealant, yes. It doesn't really show. You may, if you really wanted it glossy, I'm not sure if you need to put a regular clear polyurethane varnish on it. That I haven't tried. But again, anything is going to sink into this clay because it hasn't been fired. So I'm not sure, even if I put more and more glaze on that, if it wouldn't just sink in. Okay, so let's move that. I have my red marker, I have a gold metallic marker, and I do have white paint, and I have glitter glue. With a small brush, you can paint any of these little areas, but a lot of times I have found a Sharpie, a permanent marker is, especially if you use lace, obviously, if you have just large areas of color, it's easier with a paintbrush. But let's see, if I'm just going to outline. Nothing really that you can do now to that clay. Once you've put it inside the bowl or the plate, you're done. And you really have to wait several days before you can do anything to it. So yeah, that's about it. I'm just going to show you how to, I'm going to use a little of this glue glitter in a minute. Just going to go around these. You know what? I would give it a couple of days. It's going to have it is going to feel drier, and it always feels a little cold. But if you were, let's use this, you can really feel this wetness. And if you pick it up, obviously, if you pick it up and if anything is still floppy, obviously that's not ready. But sometimes you can tell by the color if it's still a dark, if it's still like this color, and you can feel it really cold, then it's not dry all the way through. It's going to be, it still is going to be cool, but it's not going to be really cold, if that makes any sense. I think, you know, maybe tomorrow or the next day you'll understand what I mean. This is definitely much colder than this is. And so that coldness means that it's not dry all the way through. And that's the way you can tell. But I would take it out of the dish, definitely, probably later tomorrow afternoon. And, you know, when it's holding its shape, and let it air dry, flip it over every once in a while to make sure that the other side is getting equal access to air flowing around it to dry it. Let me just outline this one. And then I'm going to use a little bit of gold. Best thing about this, you don't have to worry about it sticking to the dish. Once it starts to dry, it's going to shrink a tiny bit. It's not very noticeable. Not noticeable at all, but it will move away from the dish. And you'll be able to pick it up. I would take the dish, you know, I would hold it something like this and then take the dish off this way just to make sure. But yeah, it's going to come. Even though with this one, I press this right into the sides, it will pull away from the dish when it's dry. So you shouldn't have a problem. Like right now, it's stuck. Okay, but it won't be. It will come off. You could actually, now that you say that, let's do this one. If you want to put feet on this, I would do it in 3s because you don't want this thing wobbling. I would take a coil. Now, the thing with putting feet on it, if you've got it inside a dish like this one where it's stuck, obviously you can't put the feet on there right away. You could try tomorrow when this is dry, I think dry enough to take out, and then turn it over and put the feet in it. I'm sure you could do that. If it gets too dry, you might have an issue. But if you put it in something smaller where there is space underneath this, you could probably do that. And what you want to do is and actually these are probably too big, so I'm going to cut these down. Let's just for your feet, try to get them as equal as you can, but it's the same type of thing. You're going to score it. You're going to wet it. And you're going to have that grab. This is definitely, you're going to use this with regular clay, any type of clay. And like I said, you want to do this in like a triangle shape, so you won't have a wobble. Because this usually works. Yeah, let's see. It's collapsing in the middle right now because the clay is wet, but yes, you could do that. You could put legs on this. You know, you can always glue on some fancy beads or when it's done. And what am I going to do with this? Right now, actually, I'm going to drape this over this just for now, because I know it won't stick to that. Okay. This is a metallic paint marker. It says Craftwork pen. It's a metallic. And there's another line outside this. I'm just going inside these little edge, these little lines, impressions that I can see. Actually, these are really pretty too. You know, if you want to get, if you're looking to get really just decorative, you could glue on beads. There's all kinds of things that you could put on here. Right down to here. I'm going to put on some of that glitter glue in a minute so you can see that. Oops, there's another one. Okay. I'm just going to put a little glitter glue on my finger here. Actually, don't like that one. Let's see. Let's put some on here. There. All right. You can put it on with your finger. You know, you can, if you want to be a lot more specific, you can put it on. And as you can see, as the clay gets wet, even though it's got white paint, it starts to turn that flesh color. So that will dry out, and then you would just see the glitter on here. Let's try that gold. Let's go down in here. So there's a shape in here, and I'm going to go around that with the gold. This is, if you're doing a big area, then you can just use your fingers. You could try, I mean, you could use real glitter if you want to, but this is just going to give a little bit of a shine to it. Once this dries, you could go back with a gold pen and, you know, actually you could do the whole thing in glitter glue first when it dries and go back with a paint or a marker, whichever way you want to do it. While you're waiting for this to dry, you have plenty of time to figure out what you want to do with this. how do you want to paint it? Do you, if you didn't do designs on the inside, like with that lace, go through magazines, wallpaper. I was just thinking, because this is not going to be food safe anyway, this is just a plain. But if you had trim, you could, with a hot glue gun, you could take fabric, you could take ribbons, you could take a lot of different things and decorate them. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that you could do. Look around the house, think about what you would like to decorate it with. You could cover the back of it with felt if you want to make, then you don't have to worry so much of being on a table. If it were flat, you could hang it on the wall. I don't know if any of those command things would actually stick. I'm not sure, but depending on how heavy it is, I was just thinking I might, on the back of this, I might just make a little hole. If it could hang right on a nail. If it's flat, I would just kind of make a little spot there. And that way it will dry, and you could hang that like this. Make sure it's deep enough that will really hold on to it. All right. Well, thank you very much. And like I said before, I hope you join us in some of our other classes at the Appleton Museum in Ocala, Florida.